This story is unbelievable. Why isn't Miriam Rodriguez's story more well known? Imagine San Fernando, Mexico, a town filled with tension and dusty streets. This place was under attack. In 2012, the Zetas cartel controlled the town. Miriam Rodriguez lived here, and her life was about to change forever. Her son Karen was kidnapped, starting her nightmare. But Miriam wouldn't stay silent. She transformed, driven by love and a need for justice. The Zetas demanded ransom money. Miriam gathered all the money she could and paid them. But her son never came back. The police, scared or corrupt, did nothing. Miriam made a big decision. She would find her son's kidnappers herself. She would be the judge, jury, and executioner. Her journey would take her into the darkest places, facing true evil. Miriam's first target was a local taxi driver, a man she thought was involved in Karen's kidnapping. She had no training or experience in investigations. All she had was strong determination and a mother's intuition. She started by gathering information, piecing together bits of conversations and rumors. She became a shadow, watching, listening, and learning the cartel's movements. Her methods were unusual, driven by desperation and belief in herself. She learned to read body language, spotting lies in eye movements and voice tremors. Miriam's investigation took her deeper into the criminal world, exposing her to violence and corruption. She met informants, some scared, others wanting revenge. Each meeting brought her closer to the truth but also put her in more danger. Yet, Miriam kept going, her resolve growing stronger every day. Miriam's fight for justice came with a high cost. The cartel, noticing her persistence, put a bounty on her head. She became a target, always under the threat of violence. Her home was no longer safe but a possible crime scene. She had to keep moving, changing places, and disguising herself. Her family and friends suffered because of her fight against the cartel. She stayed away from them, knowing her presence put them in danger. But Miriam refused to give up. Her bravery, driven by love and grief, inspired others who were scared of the cartel. She became a hero, a symbol of resistance against the powerful cartel. Miriam's investigation was a solo mission, a one-woman fight against a big criminal group. She couldn't count on the police. Many were either corrupt or too scared to help. So she became an expert at disguises, changing how she looked and who she pretended to be. She was like a ghost, always one step ahead of those chasing her. Her methods were unusual, mixing clever tricks with bold moves. She set traps, tricking cartel members with fake promises of information or money. She made friends with their girlfriends, wives, and mothers, using their weaknesses. Her search for justice took her across state lines, from the dusty streets of San Fernando to the busy city of Monterrey. Each time she caught a cartel member, it was a mix of happiness and sadness. She was determined to finish her mission no matter what it took. Miriam often faced the men who ruined her life. She tracked them, following them to their hideouts. She watched them, memorizing their faces and routines. Anger built inside her, ready to explode. But she controlled it, knowing her emotions were both her strength and weakness. She confronted them, sometimes directly, sometimes through others. She gave them a choice: surrender or face her wrath. Some laughed, seeing her as just a grieving mother. Others, seeing her determination, trembled. Sometimes, violence was unavoidable. Miriam, though small, was fearless. She knew her quest for justice might cost her life. But she wouldn't die a victim. She would die fighting, her son's name on her lips. Through her hard work, Miriam helped catch many cartel members. She became very powerful and criminals were scared of her. At first the authorities ignored her, but they had to pay attention. Miriam didn't stop after catching her son's killers. She helped other families hurt by cartel violence, giving them support. Her home became a safe place for these families. Miriam listened to them and gave comfort. She taught them how to find information and fight back. Her story spread through the media and inspired people everywhere. Miriam's quest for justice took a big toll on her mind. The constant danger, the sadness from her losses, and the terrible things she saw affected her deeply. She had nightmares and couldn't sleep well, haunted by her son's kidnapping. She felt anxious and paranoid, always scared of what might happen. She was always on high alert, constantly watching her surroundings. She felt very alone, both by choice and because of her situation. Even with these mental scars, Miriam stayed focused on getting justice. She knew the cartel used fear to control people and silence them, but she refused to be silenced. Miriam Rodriguez's story, though tragically cut short by the violence she fought against, continues to inspire people everywhere. Her bravery, her strong will, and her fight for justice show the strength of the human spirit. She became a symbol of hope for those suffering, a light in a dark world. Her legacy goes beyond Mexico, inspiring those fighting against corruption and violence. Her story is told in books, documentaries, and news articles, making sure her sacrifice is remembered. She has become an icon, her image on murals and posters. Miriam's story also shows the struggles of many families in Mexico and beyond who have been hurt by violence. She gave a voice to those without one, showing the human cost of organized crime. Though Miriam is gone, her spirit lives on in the hearts of those she inspired. Miriam Rodriguez's brave fight against the cartel touched many people in Mexico and beyond. Her story, showing a mother's love and her quest for justice, became a symbol of hope for those living under the threat of organized crime. She proved that even when facing great fear and violence, one person's actions could start a movement. Across Mexico, other families who had lost loved ones found strength in Miriam's story. They formed groups, sharing information, resources, and emotional support. They organized marches and protests, demanding justice for their loved ones. Miriam's fight became their fight, her bravery their protection. Her story crossed borders, reaching communities facing similar problems around the world. Miriam's legacy is not just in the cartel members she brought to justice, but in the many people she inspired to speak out against injustice. Miriam Rodriguez's fight for justice showed the corruption and impunity in Mexico that let groups like the Zetas thrive. Her story highlighted a justice system that failed to protect its people. She fought not just for her son, but for a country struggling with its problems. The Mexican government, often linked to cartels, faced pressure to address forced disappearances. Miriam's quest for truth pushed the authorities to act. Her story sparked change, making people talk about the impact of organized crime. International human rights groups noticed, focusing on families affected by violence in Mexico. Miriam's story became a call for justice, showing the world was watching. Miriam's victory was not just in catching her son's killers, but in exposing the system's flaws and pushing for national change.
Let's go!
Miriam Rodriguez was tragically killed in 2017, on Mother's Day. Her death showed the dangers of standing up to the cartels in Mexico. It also highlighted the ongoing fight for justice and the deep-rooted culture of impunity in the country. Despite some progress, it is still very hard to bring those responsible for the many disappearances and murders to justice. Corruption in law enforcement continues, and witnesses are often too scared to speak up. Violence continues, driven by poverty, inequality, and the high demand for drugs. Yet, Miriam's legacy inspires new activists, journalists, and human rights defenders. Groups like the Movement for Peace with Justice and Dignity keep demanding an end to the violence. The fight for justice in Mexico is not over, but Miriam Rodriguez's story reminds us that hope remains even in dark times. The battle is long and tough, but Miriam Rodriguez, the Avenging Angel, remains a symbol of hope in a land seeking peace.